most of what you guys deal with is going to be lettering. So we're going to take a look at a couple things with lettering that, are going to help you. I'm going to close out my, building blocks right now. And I'm going to go ahead and close this little help screen down at the bottom. If you can see my mouse right here, this little black arrow lets me go ahead and collapse that so I have a little more room on my screen. Now, when you're dealing with lettering in IDS software, what goes on is it uses the true type fonts or the open face fonts on your computer, but there are some built-in fonts as well. So I'm going to go ahead and let me show you what I did. I went over to the A. Here's my Create toolbar. And what I did was go to this A right here. So let me go ahead and dock the toolbar. And if you guys are looking at my screen thinking, wow, that looks so much different than it did last time, it's because for those of you who've asked, I've upgraded to 10. IDS does work on 10 with no problems. And, the driver for the dongle and everything works as, the same. So I had no problems upgrading my computer. So if you're worried about upgrading to 10, don't be. It was a pretty smooth transition. I was surprised. And so far, so good. So let's go ahead and click on A to go into our lettering box. Now, when we're dealing with TrueType fonts, these are the fonts that are installed on your computer already, but you can also purchase fonts or you can download them for free. Now, when you're downloading fonts for free, bear in mind that some of them are from professional companies that want you to come back to their website and buy more of their fonts. But some of them are from people who are learning to create fonts. And what fonts are drawings put into a specific format to be able to be used on a computer for printing. If the font artist is new, sometimes they'll cross their outlines. You can't see them because it's all a solid color, but if you've worked in any graphics program, you know that you can cross outlines and they don't necessarily appear on something that's printed. But you will notice them when you try to create the font in the program. So I've gotten emails from some of you about some of the fonts that you're having problems with, and it has a lot to do with how the font drawing was created. Excuse me. So when you're working on fonts, just bear that in mind. This is, our input screen. You can put in anything you want, 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines. You could write a whole poem if you wanted to, and create your lines of lettering, a single line or multiple lines. If we come down here to text properties, this is my preview over here of the font that's in the font list. Now I'm going to click on the black arrow and I'm going to kind of scroll up here. You can see I've got these fonts with like these double things, and I'm going to have different fonts than what you have on your computer. And then I have fonts with a single thing. So if I type in like ABC, and I have this solid blue showing here and just one @ symbol, that means that, that font, in this case, mine came from the Adobe systems I installed. But if I come down here and I see that there's nothing next to it, like no TT, no little page, showing it's a postscript, and I click on this, you can see I have this outline view here versus the blue view here, right? So, as I'm doing that, bear in mind that, if you see blue, it is a font that's installed on your system. If you come down here and you see, the outline, that is a pre-digitized font. So it depends on what you have installed on your system. So let's take a look. This is what I've got installed on mine. You can see the Duchess font. That's actually a font that's pre-done as well. It's it's a shaded font. And here's my Adobe fonts. Here's a TrueType font. Here's all of my installed fonts. And you can see I have some TTs here as well with those little @ symbols. And then I have some more down here with flares and, Futura. And it's also showing as this outline format. Then I know that these were created manually and they're a pre-digitized set. All right, so I'm going to scroll down a little bit further. And, you can see I have these as well. These are maybe a little more creative. It depends on what I've got on this computer. But, you can see there's something like that as well. Okay, now we're going to start with just basically the Arial font. And if you've moved off like I have and you're trying to figure out where Arial is, if you type the first 3 letters, ARI, you can see it brings up really quick. If I just type the A, it starts me at the A, right? So, type the letters together really fast and you'll get to the Arial font. Now, I'm working in millimeters, which you guys know I prefer millimeters. 25.4 is 1 inch lettering. Okay, and the 1 inch is measured on the height of the letters in capital letters, or like D's and B's, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just type in a few letters. I'm going to type in an A, an uppercase M, a lowercase m, an O, and an E. And we'll just put those words in. Now, it comes in wireframe. And when it's in wireframe, that means I can do a lot of different things to it. And we're going to kind of cover some of those things. But for right now, I just want to go ahead and put the stitches or generate the stitches into the design. And there's my lettering design. Now, in the text box, I have a lot of options here. We'll start with some basic ones. These little diamonds, if I click on these, they turn green. If I come over and I hold my mouse over it, I get a bullseye cursor and I can move this around or space or kern each individual letter. And sometimes I need to do that because the spacing is also controlled by the TrueType font creation. Those settings are set in the font itself. Now, if I need to space out the whole word and I come over, see where my edit button is? If I come over to this arrow, I can left click and hold and drag it, and it spaces all the letters further apart or closer together depending on how I drag that. So I have the individual spacing nodes right here, and I can select more than one. If I hold the control key, I can select a second one. And then I have this little arrow that's pointing to the right that allows me to kern all of the letters at one time. Okay, now as I move up here above this kerning or spacing arrow, I have another arrow, and if I left click and drag it, it lets me stair step. And I can stair step all the way to, centering these letters if I want, but that's what this is. It's for stair stepping. And if you do something and you don't like it, remember you can undo. Okay, now this arrow that's at the top that's pointing upwards, that arrow is going to let me do a couple of different things with my letters. First, it's going to let me, scale them taller, or I can scale them shorter, or I can flip them over onto, the text path line. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and undo that and get back to our regular word here. Okay, now I also have an edit button, and I joke it's because you can't put spell check in a text program, but you might need to come in here and select a different font or select a different size. You might need to do those things. So you click on edit and you come back here and you can go ahead and change anything you want. You can put a whole new word in there if you want. But what you do have to be careful of is that this text path is already defined. So say I need to change this to 17.5. I don't want to stay on this current line. If I stay on the current line, here's what happens. See how spaced out my words are now? And yes, I could use this and I could squish them together. Right? I could do it that way. Or, I could say edit, and I know that I'm going to change the size and say, I don't want to do the current line, but I want to do a line. And, from here to here. And I might still have to space those out a little bit, but I have a little more control, especially if you know that they need to go into a specific space. Okay, so those are kind of the basic of the text tab. Now, if you have to make a lot of changes, sometimes you're better off to just delete the word and come back up to your lettering and say, okay, I need to make this, 17.5. It's auto text path. Let's go ahead and say okay and generate. And you can see I get my spacing so much better. So you have a lot of different options on this. Did you guys have any questions so far on the lettering? You guys are good on the lettering? Okay, so those are the basics of the font. So now I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And let's go ahead and go back into our lettering. And I'm just going to make this 25 for right now. It's about an inch, a little shorter than an inch, and let's go ahead and generate. Now, the reason I picked these letters are I wanted to show you something pretty specific to these letters. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and go into 3D preview. and change the color because that color is really difficult to see. All right, so here we go. Now, we have corners. We have a corner here and here and here, and those are all cap corners. Okay, we have the O, and I'm going to show you something different with the O and the M. But on the C, I also have a corner, and that is not a cap corner. That's just flowing, right? So let's take a look at how we can improve these letters, perhaps. Like this cap corner on the A is actually pretty good, but we're going to look at some of the editing tools so that when you need to use them, you know where they are. The first thing I'm going to do is right-click on the A to select it. Lettering that's created in the program is created so that you can edit it just like it's an area or a satin area or just a regular area. So I can reshape these letters and I can change some of the stitching directions in my satin as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and right click on the A, and you can see this is what I get. Edit stitches, create an outline, insert stitch, replace stitches, and I'm thinking, well, none of these are really showing up really well except for maybe stitch settings, right? So to edit this, I have to go, especially if it's satin, okay, I have to go up to pick one of my editing tools. And since I want to change something that pertains to the satin stitching in the letter, I'm going to select View Angle. When I select View Angle, you know, I have all of my little block lines. And I have this corner up here, and you can see what's going on. It's just kind of coming up and joining and then kind of going straight up, and that's called a cap corner. So to get to the tools to change this corner, I'm going to right-click on the shaded letter, or I can come up to Angle at the top of the menu. If you follow my mouse up at Angle, I'm going to get the same menu. Okay, so it's your choice which one you want. I usually right-click on the letter, and I'm going to select Edit Corner. And then I have to pick the corner. So that's the corner. And you can see I kind of dragged all the way across there like that. And here's my select corner box. This is the cap corner. You can see it's depressed a little bit here, indicating that that is the corner that's selected. Now, I could change it to this corner, but that probably wouldn't flow well here. I could change it to this corner, but it would give me kind of a boxy look. Or I could miter the corner and it would kind of split this. So let's go ahead and see what the miter does and say, okay. You can see it's reset those blocks here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and press Escape to turn off the tool and then Generate to take a look at what it's done. So you can see that split there now. So I've changed the way the stitches. Now, when that would come in handy would be if you had a very large letter, but you still wanted it to be in satin, and you didn't want that cap strung all the way across there. And to give you an example, you go back to 1-to-1. If I had lettering that looked like this, you can see this cap corner. We'll see how big we can stretch this. All right, so here's what we have. Okay, there's my new corner, but I'm going to take this and go back to the old corner so I can show you what I'm talking about. There's my cap corner. Okay, now I've made this letter much bigger, and you can see what's happening. It's automatically splitting there, right? I don't have as much control. It kind of split there, but then it goes up. Let me zoom in a little bit for you. It goes up across the top. And you can kind of see, you know, it's all straight across, but what's happening is that there's this break right here. You know, the needle's dropping because it's too wide. So it doesn't drop here, then it begins to drop, and then it doesn't drop here. So you have kind of odd stitching, right? So, you know, that would not be the best way to do that letter. The better way, since you're going to have that drop anyway, would be to go to your view angle, you know, select Edit Corner, and then drag around the corner. You just press and hold your left mouse button down, drag around that corner, and select your mitered corner. Then you get a clean drop across there, and that letter is going to stitch better. You can see it does look a little bit better because it's evenly split at the top. So, you know, that's one way to control wide letters. And you can see the same thing is automatically happening with the M, where there's that automatic split because they're too big, right? And, you know, you might want to do the same thing. Select the M And you've got the problem down here as well too. So what you've got are, 3 corners on this M. So you would just, go into your view angle and then go to edit corner, and you would select each individual corner and tell it what you want it to be. And I'm going to select a different corner down here so you can see what that would end up like. See the difference in the block? So let's go ahead and generate. And there you go. You've got this split now, and you've got this split. This would probably work better for an N than an M, maybe. But you can kind of see what's going on. Now, we're going to look at the M and the O separate. But right now, I want to come over to this E. So I'm going to right-click on this E. And, right now I have a pretty good flow. Let's zoom in on the E, except I'm angling here. And, I might want that to go straight up and down. It depends on the size of the E. But, I've got the same issue. What do you do with that corner? Right now, that corner looks pretty good that way. So I might leave it that way, right? Even though this angle's here. But what's going on going across here is that because this is angled to navigate that corner, it's angled and then angled, 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 and it begins to straighten out as it meets here. Okay, if you look at that in stitch view, see what I'm talking about? It angles here, and then it remains angled until it gets to here, it starts to straighten out. But you can see it didn't do that quite here. So one of the ways to fix that is to come into your view angle, right-click, and add a stitch direction guideline. And all I have to do is just drag a line right here, and let's generate. And you can see I've now controlled that corner. So now this is angled where it needs to be, but then it straightens out much more quickly. Okay, so those are some of the basic editing tools that you want to use for your letters. Now, I'm going to talk about this M. So as I come into this M, you can see it looks like that's going to look awful here and that's going to look awful here. It's not. By the time it stitches, this compensation is not going to show in the stitch out. And, a lot of people feel like they have to make some changes here to make this work. I would tell you stitch it first because you're not going to see the compensation here. It's going to just blend perfectly. But what I wanted to show you was really in these corners here. When you're creating lettering, let me get out of 3D view, and you're navigating a curve, in order for this inside to not be much more dense than this outside, what the program does is called stitch shortening. And you'll see it in the preview, but it doesn't show up in the stitching. These shortened stitches right here keep this from becoming so dense on anything that has a curve. But these are underneath the top stitching, so you don't see them. You don't notice them. It's the same thing on the O. See the stitch shortening in the O? It's not quite as severe, but you can see some of it pulling back a little bit to make sure that they're the same on the outside and the inside. All right, so that's kind of the basics of lettering. Do you guys have any questions about anything I've showed you so far? You guys are good? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this. I just wanted to show you the basics by using just a very basic font. So let's go into our insert text. And I'm going to pick a different one. I'm going to pick Arial Black and type in the word love embroidery. All right, we're going to leave it at auto, but I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. We'll make it about 50. And let's generate. So what I have, let me change that color so you can see it as well. So what I have is this. Would that stitch okay? No, you can see that it's too wide here. It's too wide there. The rest of this might be okay. I might have to deal with the V here. This might be okay, but this letter and this letter definitely aren't going to be okay. And then on top of it, I've got some problems on these letters. So let's kind of look at the L and the E. Everything else looks like it would be fine at that size. It's about 2 inches, a little less than 2 inches. So part of my problem here is that this is too wide. You can see it's at a corner as well. So I have to make kind of a judgment call on this. I can fix some of the problems, but some of them I have to make a judgment call on. So let's start with this L. As I click on this L and I go into view angle, here's what I have. I have the same problem I had before. You know, there's nothing straightening these sections out, and that's just going to be a long section because it's an angle. So, you know, go into view angle mode so you can see these angle lines. Right click and say add a stitch direction guideline. In this case, to help with some of that, I want to put a straight line here and a straight line here. Then all I have to worry about is that corner, really. So you can see I still have a little breaking here, but the rest of this is looking better. So on this letter, I have to make a decision. Is that going to be acceptable? Well, you know, the way to tell would be to go to your measuring. If you look at next to your properties, there's a little ruler. Click on this ruler and measure. You know, left click and hold and drag across, and there's your measurement. You know, it's saying that it's, you know, it's a little more than 10 millimeters, about 11 millimeters. Okay, well, press escape to turn that tool off and go into your settings. In your settings, when you go to, you know, satin, because that's what lettering is, and go to your satin tab, there's this break long stitch option. My maximum step is set to 10, so I'm not much more than 10. So it would probably be fine if I said remove that. And go ahead and say, okay, so now I know that there's not going to be a break. That is stitch shortening that I'm seeing right now. It's not the break like here. So this letter is going to stitch fine. It's not long enough to worry about that, but you can see I was able to straighten those lines out and take out some of those breaks there. And it's going to be kind of the same thing with the E. Select the E, go into your view angle, and you're going to have the same problem. You know, just right click and say add a stitch direction guideline, and you're going to see a world of difference in how this is going to stitch. You know, you have to add a couple of more guidelines here, but it's going to control the length, because when the thread is sewing at an angle, A, it's going to be longer, and B, you know, it's just going to cause some problems. Okay, so now here's my problem here, and it's going to be the same thing. I know it's going to be about the width, but you could, or about the same width as this, but you can see I got rid of that break stitch except here and here. So just go to your settings, go to the satin tab, and remove that break. And now all I have is stitch shortening here, and it's going to stitch much, much, much better. All right, so before I go on, does anybody else have any questions? Any questions on anything we've done so far? Does this make sense about controlling the length? As a matter of fact, let me do something here so you can kind of see what the difference is. I'm going to take out the 2 lines that I put in and go ahead and regenerate the stitches. Okay, you can see straight, you know, it's going straight, straight, angled, angled, angled. And this is where I'm going to run into a little bit of a snag. Now, I took the break long stitch off, if you recall. So let's go put that back on, and you can see what the difference is. Okay, see? By adding those stitch direction guidelines, I'm able to remove some of the issues coming down into this. So remember, view angle, right click, add a stitch direction guideline. And we're just going to go ahead and drag those back. If you make a mistake, no big deal. You know, you can move your mouse over and, you know, select these and just drag them into place, or you can even delete them if they don't need to be there. All right, so let's go ahead and generate that, and you can see now there's the only sections I have a break in, and that's very controllable. I've measured, you know, I know that that's about 11 here, and that's going to be about 11 there, so no big deal. I'm just going to come over here and remove the check mark in break long stitch. And those letters will stitch just fine on my machine. It's not so wide that the machine's going to have a problem with it. It's not so wide that it's going to cause any bad stitching in my lettering. And, you know, you can see here you have the same problem with the A and the M and the B. Don't worry about it. But we have a problem. Here's our E. That's kind of an ugly E. This V is not going to stitch well. You can see there's a break there and there's that. So easy enough. You just right click on it, and you can hold your control key and right click to select multiple letters. Go into view angle And, we have multiple different issues here. We're going to fix this one. But this one, we're going to right click and say, let's edit our corner. This is a corner. As long as I scoop around that corner, I can say, you know what, I really want to miter that one. And, this I'm going to do something else with and show you what we need to do. But there's my V. It's going to stitch better. It's going to look better, right? I could do a break long stitch here, but if you measure across this widest part right here, that's about 12, 13 millimeters, and that might be a little bit wider than what you want to do, but it's up to you. You could still remove the break long stitch there. On this E, and here's where we kind of run into problems. On the E, this would be okay. It wouldn't be phenomenal. But the reason that this E is looking the way that it is in this section is because of the shape of this font right here. So, I'm going to just select the E, and I'm going to go into View Outline. In View Outline, you can see, wow, this opening looks really awful, right? So, let's zoom in a little bit here, and this would significantly improve the stitching of this letter if this area were cleaned up a little bit. And let me zoom out just a little bit. So, I need to look at this and say, okay, what do I need to clean this up? Well, let's go into Node View and see if there's any way to just kind of drag this over a little bit. And, if I have to, I can delete those points and arc that, make it a little neater. And the same thing here, let's drag this down and try to make that a little straighter. And this line's not straight, so I'm going to right click and straighten it. That gives me a little better gauge of, how to pull that down a little bit, right? Even that out. And let's get rid of this. Right click on it, delete it. Now all I have is this point here, and that's going to be pretty easy. If I right click and just click on those lines, then I can get those pretty even. But I can also right click and smooth that point. And that allows me to kind of control those, curves here a little bit better. Now this is not going to instantly fix anything. I'm going to go ahead and generate. You can see it didn't instantly fix anything. I need to reset my blocks. So I come down, and there's a real quick, painless way to do this. Watch my mouse. See my mouse right here? I'm going to come right down to this quick bar, and I'm going to say, make it complex. Come back down and say, make it satin. And what that does is reset those blocks. Now you can see I've got a much cleaner looking E here. Sometimes we edit and we forget that we have to reset blocks on satin stitching. So just change it to complex and then come back and change it to satin and let the program reset everything. And let me kind of zoom in on that. You can see that's much better, right? That's going to be much better to stitch. Now all I have to do is go to View Angle, right click, add a stitch direction guideline. I can add one here if I want to, and add one here to straighten it out. And, even here, if I don't like this, let's left click on this one and delete it, and drag this one over this way. Okay, what I did was cause this to stitch smoothly over to here. Okay, and you're going to see a little bit of a difference in this bottom one. Ready? That's a much better looking E. And if you're looking at it thinking, ooh, I don't know about this one, Bernie, right? There's this hole here. Don't worry about it. Remember, we have stitch shortening. But if you're stressing about that hole, just go into View Angle and just move one of your straight lines over just a little bit. And you won't see that, but it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to show when it stitches unless you put them all on top of each other. I would not worry about that. This, I wouldn't worry about either. I'm zoomed in like 1000%. This is going to look good when it stitches. I'm not going to see this, that little tiny dot, not going to show up. So I've got one E done. Now, it'd be easy to just copy and paste and put in place, but it's just as easy to go grab this E and zoom in. Hold on, let me generate some stitches here. Hold on a second. Let me open back up. Hold on, sorry. You can see all the bazillion icons on my desktop. All right, so there's my embroidery. And, you know, this E I could just copy and paste, but you know what? I'm going to just come down here to this E, zoom, and it, you know, it was pretty easy to fix. That wasn't a tough fix. View outline, unless you want it to be perfectly even, you know, and this is probably not going to show up too much as it is. I just pulled that one down, came over to this node, pulled it down, straightened this up with a right click and straightened the line and just made sure that those were even. You want to make sure it's kind of lining up even here, right? And delete, right click and delete, smooth. And from here, it's just kind of adjusting that point and maybe slightly adjusting the curves here to get what you want. And then if you remember, since, you know, I know that this has to be adjusted, you know, it's going to be real simple. You know, just make sure you've got everything the way you want it to be. And don't even generate, just go over here and say complex, take it back to satin. There's that cleaned up E. Go back into view angle, right click, you know, add a stitch direction guideline. You want one here. You're just left clicking and dragging here. We know that, you know, we need to escape to turn off the tool. And then I'm just going to left click on this one, press delete, and drag these nodes where they need to be. You know, if you want to, you can adjust these as well. You know, it depends on what you want to do. And then just generate. There you go. Now you've got your E, and let's zoom all the way out. It doesn't look any different than that one. By the time it stitches, it's going to look exactly the same, right? Okay, so do you guys have any questions on what I've done so far on the lettering? You guys are all good? Guys are good? No questions? All right, so now we're going to take a look at this Y. First off, I kind of need to space this, so I'm going to just left click on the lettering. Click on that little diamond, and I'm just going to move the Y over just a little bit. Don't worry about that jump in between there. You know, it's going to disappear when we generate. So I'm just going to move that where it needs to go. Now, I'm going to right click on the Y, and let me move my zoom tools over here. I'm going to zoom selected. And, you know, look at this and I think, yeah, I don't really know if I like that. It's going to be a matter of personal choice, but I would much rather this came across here. So we're going to use another tool. And what we're going to use, let me dock the question bar here, is our outline tools and a little bit of node editing. So I'm going to come over to, with this letter right click selected so it's flashing, I'm going to come up to view outline. And you know, here it is, here's my outline. Now, what I want to do is I want to split this piece off so that they're two separate pieces. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say divide with a line. If you're more comfortable with divide with a curve, use it. Divide with a line is 2 points. One on the outside, one on the other side, you know, outside the outline here and outside here. And, you know, it takes a little bit of practice, but you know what? Divide with a curve, I don't have to be super perfect. I just have to kind of come up here and place a left click on the outside. Then I can hit this V, or, you know, that little point there, right? And I can left click and drag across here and left click right about where I want it to be, which is right about there. And then I just press enter. So sometimes divide with the curve gives you a little bit more control. So don't be afraid to use either one. But either way, remember to press escape to turn off your tool. And we're going to have to edit here a little bit. So if you right click off to the side, just select this piece. See how choppy that is there? So no matter how you did it, it was going to kind of still be choppy. So we're going to use a couple of tools. If I go into edit mode, I could just left click on these and try to do it, right? And I would probably spend a little more time doing it than if I used one of the other tools. So you can try edit mode if you want, or you can right click on the selected area and adjust with an arc or a line. In this case, we want to adjust with a line. We want it to be straight. And we're going to pick this segment from here to here. And here's my starting point. Here's where I want it to end. And when I mouse over this line, it turns blue, and I left click and it's an instant straight adjustment. If you don't like any little wobbles up here, you could even come up here and say, okay, from here to here, it's got to be straight too, and make those adjustments very quickly. When you're done with the tool, press escape, and now I've got that straight. And, if you don't like something, remember, you can come in and delete a point, and you can still right click and curve that mildly if you need to. If you don't like this point, delete it. So you still have options, but sometimes that cleans things up much, much, much faster for you. See how clean that is? That's kind of a nice clean swoop. Remember that right click on the line allows you to straighten it or curve it. Okay, now I have this piece that has to meet up here. So I'm going to right click here, and this is going to be very simple. I'm going to pull these nodes so that there's a slight overlap. Okay, see the slight overlap? And then I'm going to right click off to the side and generate. From this point, now it's just a little bit of cleanup. I want this piece to stitch first and that piece to come over and stitch second. But I've got a little cleanup here on this piece. No big deal. View outline. On this one, it's even easier. All I have to do is just kind of left click and drag that line down to there. If you're more comfortable, you could say add a stitch direction, block line. And you could drag a couple lines here if you want it to go a certain way. I'm going to press escape, and I'm going to go ahead and generate. And there you go. You've got, this Y now that looks really good. And sometimes splitting these is going to be, splitting these is going to be the only way to get your letters to do what you want it to do. So you've got a lot of tools on lettering. First off is controlling your stitch direction. By controlling how those, what direction those guidelines stitch in. So you have several options, and I'm going to have to put you on mute just for a second, and I will. I apologize for that. Anyway, to get back to the lettering, you have a lot of tools. You can use your guidelines. But when you're working with lettering and it's satin stitching, you're going to want to use view angle. These are your block guidelines, so you can control those. You can use your edit corner tool. You can reshape or slice up a letter. So you have a lot of options when you're cleaning up a font. If you have a customer's logo where they have the first letter that is different than the rest of them, you can even use the backdrop image, find the font that's very close to their logo, and then you can begin to reshape it to match what their logo is. Okay, so do you guys have any questions on the lettering so far? You guys are good? Okay, so we're going to take a look at, okay, hold on, here's the question. No question, it was just a comment, sorry. All right, so now We've got our lettering. We just love embroidery, and you might have to center these things. Well, the lines of embroidery, are just individual lines. If I have to edit one line, if I have to edit, any specific thing on this, like arc it or anything like that, I have my own edit button for each line. But in most cases, what you need to do is align these. Just left click on one line, hold your control key, left click on the second line, and then follow my mouse. I'm coming down to the Align toolbar. In the Align toolbar, I can align the vertical centers. So you can align multiple lines of lettering. So if you're worried about like a customer's logo and you have multiple lines of lettering, don't worry. You can edit each one after you enter it. As a matter of fact, if you have a customer's logo and maybe one line of lettering is one letter or one type of font, you press enter, that gives you a new line. Just pick a different font, and you can enter as many fonts as you want in this line of lettering. If you have a customer whose first letter is something different, you can even do that. It can even be a different size. So treat this like it's a word processing box. When you're in Word, you can type, each letter different if you want. I used to joke that you could write a ransom note because you make them different sizes, you can make them different fonts, and each one of these could be a different size or a different font. There's not any limit to what you can do here. So when you have a customer's logo, you could actually enter all of these. And I'm going to go ahead and just use the word love and show you what I mean. Let me move this out of the way. Okay, so, here's my customer's logo, and it's multiple things, and I've got L, and the OVE has to be up here. Okay, if you follow my mouse, just ungroup, and you've got the L, and then just left-click on this first letter, control key, left-click on the second letter, keep holding the control key, left-click on that third letter, come back down, and just group those. So now you've got OVE grouped, and maybe you need that to be a little bit bigger, so we'll make it a little bit bigger. And then you have your L. Okay, so these are selected. Hold your control key, select the L. Come down to the Align toolbar and use these tools to align things the way they need to be aligned. And then if you want to move this over, just left click and use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move those over. So you have a lot of different options with your lettering. I just kind of wanted to point that out and show you. Now, do you guys have any questions? Because we're not going to do a lot on lettering. I want you to get comfortable editing lettering before we get into small lettering and big lettering and things like that. But I wanted to show you some basics on lettering because, I get a lot of emails about the letters. And Selena's asking if I can show how to fix the serif, and I will in a second. But before we go on, I want to make sure that you guys kind of understand how to edit those letters. Okay, no more questions. You guys are all good with this. So you're going to practice these letters, and you're going to use like the, Arial fonts first, and then you're going to kind of branch out, right? I'm going to take your silence as a yes. So, all right, Selena wants to see how to do the serifs, which is kind of the same thing. Okay, so we're going to go back in here, and there's my word L or love, and I'm just going to work on this L. Okay, so I'm going to take OVE out of here, and we're not even going to worry about it. Okay, this one has all kinds of serifs in it, right? So I'm trying to think of letters that generally give you problems like this. And that would be about it. Okay, so I'm going to leave it big too so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, now, see what the problem is? You can look at this outline before you even make it and kind of see where your problems are going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and generate. Let's change the color so you can see what's going on. That's not a very good color. Yep, that's a good color. Okay, here's what I've got. Besides the fact it's too big, we're not even going to worry about that. I'm going to go over to satin and just break that long stitch. Okay, so let me zoom in. This one didn't do too bad, actually. Remember I talked about the font and how it's created and how it behaves? This is doing the serifs correctly. Okay, see how, this is correct. Let's kind of scroll over here. Even the A is looking pretty good. Let's look over here at the B. That's looking pretty good too. And, on this, there isn't a lot to do. Except, generally you end up with like an I. Let me try an I and see if that works. But it looks like this font's made pretty good. So let's try I and T. All right, so let's see what we end up with here. And we'll just get rid of lab. Okay, you can see this one's actually doing it correctly, except for this T. I have to edit that T a little bit, but I'm not finding a very good font for doing this. But to give you an idea of why this is doing this correctly, it's automatically doing it correctly, but see what it's doing? It's actually created a block here. The font itself is not very clean, but what you would do with that is go into View Outlines, Lena, and right-click and say, you know what, divide it with a line. If you want that serif to stitch correctly, divide it with a line. And then you know that that's going to be divided out and it's going to stitch cleanly, This one did it automatically, but, you can see I've got some issues on this T. This T looks actually pretty awful. This is the one, I'm going to look at it and think, oh, wow, I really have to do something here because it's looking pretty bad. And, I would select this one, View Outline, and, take a look at how things are lining up. And let's try like this, divide with the line, and just chop this piece off. And just because I chop that piece off doesn't mean I still don't have to come over here and say, let's change it to complex, and let's change it, back to satin. And, ooh, that's still not looking very good. And you might have to play with this one a little bit. This is the one that would drive me crazy. I've got these block lines in here that are going to cause me problems. So I'm going to kind of go back and undo the property here and go back and back until I'm done with the split. Okay, so when I look at this, I think, I've got these problems here, so I might have to do like a double split. Like maybe my best way to do it is to divide it with a line across here, from here to here maybe, or just reshape this whole letter because it's going to cause a problem no matter what I do. But, I might want to chop this away too. So now I've got these two things cut away. And then this would be the piece that I said complex and then said satin. And then I could take a look at moving these block lines, right? I'd have to clean up that edge, but I would say let's get rid of this block and let's pull this one down here. And control it in that fashion. Let me show you the whole thing. That's going to be a little bit better. I might be able to get away without chopping that off. But either way, I'm going to have to edit the shape of this letter because of the way it is. And, this serif's not looking bad here. But, you might want to chop this one off too and say, I really don't like this. Remember, View Outline and divide it with a line. And just cut it across and then plan on editing some of those little extra nodes that you end up with if you don't like them. But that's the only way to control those serifs in that fashion is to cut them away and make them their own entity. And then you're just going to want to make sure that you're stitching in a logical order. Like this I should probably bring up here. And, like I would drag this under a little bit. If you cut something away like this little T here, I would go into the node edit and you can see I've got some cleanup there. And I would drag these under to make sure that they're going to not split away. And then make sure that they're in the right stitching order. So does that make more sense, Selena? it's kind of a slice and dice thing, and sometimes it's trial and error. And let's remove the break stitch here, even though these are too large. And so now I'm going to get a much better stitch out here. It's just kind of controlling things. And if I can't control it by moving those block guidelines, then I'm going to slice it up and just make sure it's in the right order. Yep, Selena says slice and dice. There you go, slice and dice. So, don't ever think just because you can't get a letter to do something that, you can't just slice it up. It doesn't matter. If you look at this, okay, this piece here, this piece, if you had to slice those serifs away, you have trimmers on your machine. Worst case, you put these on top, or stitch the body and then stitch these and it trims between there. Not a big deal. But, you can see even on the T, there's a logic to how it's stitching. You just want to make sure things line up correctly. And even on this T, you could kind of stretch that out and reshape that whole serif. So, all right, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot on the lettering because there's a bazillion things you can do on the lettering. I want you all to get comfortable with editing your letters. Now, I am going to go into something about editing though. I'm going to select this T, and if I really need to reshape something based on a customer's logo, I'm going to go to View Outline. And, so that I can see the logo underneath, I'm going to go into Edit Mode and, pretend there's a picture here. Then I'm going to say, oh yeah, I got to reshape this. Okay, right-click, adjust with new points. And if they happen to have a logo that there's some funky thing here, from here to here, and this has to be edited, pick that line. And if I left click, I get, straight segments. And if I right click, I get curved segments. So you could reshape this letter any way you want. Now that's not going to stitch in satin, obviously, but, no biggie. Say you want a satin or a satin fill, or just make it complex. That would be kind of interesting. Actually, I could probably get away with just saying satin. Oh, I can't because of that. So, we'll just say, okay, it's complex. All right, so you have a lot of different options. All right, sorry, let me cancel that for a second. Marina's saying that she used the Century School Book and the top of the L did the split stitch like that. That has to do with whatever font you're using. But and Marina's saying she can't figure out how to change the direction of the top part. Split it away. Split it away if you need to. I can't quite picture the font because it depends on where you got the Century School Book font. But I'll see if I can kind of pull it up real quick. And sorry, you know what, Marina, can you tell me what letter that was again? I think you said L, but I kind of moved the thing. Okay, see, I have Century School Book, and there's a bunch of different ones. It depends on where you got the font. I don't know if this will be close enough or not, but we'll see. Probably not. Hold on. Let me make this bigger just so I can see. And because that always looks awful, let me change the color. Okay, so you can see what I've got here. I've got the perfect problems with serifs, right? And it's going to be the same thing. I'm going to slice these babies away. Even down here, like that's kind of already done it itself, but this looks awful down here. So, use your tools, go to View Outline, right click, get to your menu, and just adjust with a line. And if you're nervous, adjust with the curve. Maybe you need to start out here to align things a little bit better, right? No biggie, so you have to place a couple of extra points. There you go. I mean, I just placed a couple of extra points to make sure things were aligned correctly. And you can see I can slice that away. And you're talking about the L here. You're not really going to get that to change very well. You can try your view out angle tools. But you can see I've got this even though I try to pull that away, I've got a block line here. See this dark solid line? That's a block line. So really the only way, I'm going to change that, even moving that block line doesn't do anything, is to come in here or go into your view outline and say, you know what? We're just going to slice you apart. Divide with a line or divide with the curve. And sometimes when it's more complicated like this, divide with the, curve works. You just have to place a couple of extra points, but it gives you a little more control. Okay, so divided it with a curve. This is the piece we're working with. Come down to your quick toolbar and say complex. Come back and say satin. And, now I have a whole lot less going on with this piece. And let me go ahead and generate the whole letter. Okay, here's my whole letter, but this piece is the one I have to work with. And because of this little shaping thing, I might have some problems, but let's see what we can do. I've got this, this line here, I could probably delete it. This line, I've got some problems because of the shape of this letter, so I might want to move this so that it's, cut this part off maybe. You've got some issues because of the letter itself. So, this may not be the perfect way to do it. Let me see if I can angle this, because you're going to have this problem where you're running into here. Okay, well, we can see what we can do with this. But either way, I'm going to have to worry about navigating this. So let's see what we can do if we can pull some of these over a little bit and generate. And you can see that makes it too wide, right? So I might have to get a little bit creative. I might have to say, well, I've got that part there. That's too severe of a curve. Is anybody going to really notice if I go like this into view outline and come down here and say, well, I don't really need all these points, and just delete these and delete this one and right click and straighten that just a little bit. Probably nobody's going to notice, and it's going to give me a whole lot more wiggle room here. I can kind of bring these down. I can control this a little better. And, it's wide, so I would, of course, have to say, take out the break long stitch here. Okay, but I've got a little more control. If I can straighten that serif out, now I can come in here and say, okay, I need just a little more control maybe. They're looking at the serif. I might have to go into view outline and just maybe pull this down a little bit. Nobody's going to really notice on a certain size if it looks like that or not. And oh yeah, by the way, let's make it complex. Let's come back and reset these things. And now I probably have a whole lot more options. Now I can just pull this straight and I can pull this over. Now remember, you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, that letter's supposed to look exactly like that. No, it just is supposed to give you the illusion that it looks like that. And if what you need is that little serif off to the side, nobody, unless the letter is very large, in which case you're going to probably turn it into complex, nobody's going to notice if you adjust that arc on that serif at all. Let me go 1 to 1. Nobody's going to notice, but I would slice down here. So there's your L. You might shorten that up a little bit. I probably would shorten it a little bit right in here. But does that give you an idea how you can control that? So you can kind of control that a little bit. And like I said, I would take this piece, honestly. Let me zoom in on it. Because I just need the illusion of that serif. I don't even need it to be this wide. You can even leave it at an angle if you need to. If you need a little arc, okay, make a little arc. Or slice it a little bit higher or something, so that, let me move this up a little bit. So you have a little more control over this. You have a lot of different things that you can do. You can see I'm kind of angling these up a little bit. And I'll just control their stitch direction by controlling those angle lines. Okay, so there is a little bit better serif. And it's just a matter of editing. And, if you do a lot of work on a letter, save it to your building blocks. So you have a lot of different options on this. And, sometimes you just have to slice and dice and move things around a little bit to get what you want. But, when you get it, remember, if you make the perfect L and the perfect lowercase l, right? Let me kind of get rid of this one. If those of you who were in the training know that you have this building block bar down here. See my building blocks? And if you don't, you can go up to View, Toolbar, and there's my building block bar. Just put a check in it. But once I get like the perfect L here, if I've edited the perfect little L or the perfect big L, and I don't really want to do this font again, no big deal. Come down to your building bar, right click. You want to add a page, name it, Century. I can't spell, so I'm just going to stop it there, Century, right? Okay, so now you've got this new tab. Now you've got this letter, and you just go up to Accessories, Building Block, save the building block, find your Cent or Century, whatever you name it, click on it, make sure it's highlighted in blue, and say lower, boy, I really can't type today, lower L. So now, I've saved this, and, you won't see it right away. You have to kind of click off one and click on the other one. But there it is. So anytime I need to pull that baby out, there it is. I only have to do the editing once. And if it's a font you're using all the time for a customer, save it. Yes, it comes in as an embroidery design and not lettering. But remember, I can always select the letters, align the letters. And if you really have to get them aligned perfectly or in a space, follow my mouse. You come down to the Super Align tool here. And we're going to align them on a line. And you know what? You have your spacing tools then. Whoops, sorry. Let me undo that. When I say to align it on a line, okay, I get to draw the line. So if you know that you only have 2 letters, just draw the line that big. And I still have the spacing tools, right? I can come over here and it behaves just like the lettering, with the exception of edit doesn't let me change them. So, you can get these to align. You can get these to space. You can get these to do anything you want, even though they're embroidery designs. And if you save them to your building block bar, every time you generate, it'll recalculate your in and out points, and you can edit them again if you need to. So does that make sense now on the lettering and, getting what you want out of lettering? Now, don't forget, too, in your lettering, you guys have pre-digitized fonts. If you look at the lettering and you remember to go to the fonts, let me kind of scroll up here, that have, the @ symbols like this, you might find there's an awful lot of fonts in here that, might be the perfect font for your customer. These are the basic fonts. Make sure there's no TT next to it and you see an outline. Then you know that, this is the font that, is going to be used. Or, is pre-digitized. And these have serifs too. You can kind of see the serifs in these. You can see, I'm going to zoom in this large. You can see kind of what's going on. You can see the block lines in them. You can see how they're edited. And it depends on what the font is. That's flares. There's flash. And, just make sure you see the outline. There's one with a kind of a serif. Okay, so, you can see what's going on here. You have a lot of different things and a lot of different options. All right, you guys have any questions? Because we're just going to do a little bit on lettering, and then next time we're going to do more on lettering. And we're going to start playing with reshaping. But I want you to get comfortable with editing the lettering, because hands down, that's probably the biggest question I get on digitizing. I can't find the font. I don't know what it is. It's got this custom font. And usually it's not really a custom font. It's the first letter is custom, or a couple of them have been edited. And, it makes the whole font look different. So do you guys have any questions at all? You guys are good? All right, we're going to go ahead and stop here because I want you to kind of practice slicing and dicing lettering. and playing with some of those settings and getting used to editing. And the next webinar, I'll send out the schedule. It's going to be in September. And, you know, we'll go through more lettering. We'll start talking about shadowing and how to do different things in the program as well. And then I've got to get down to small lettering. So it depends on how much time we have the next time, if we'll get to small lettering or if that'll be like a third lettering option. So in the meantime, if you guys have any specific lettering things that you deal with your customers, go ahead and send them in to me. And then, yeah, it gives me an idea of what you guys need in the way of, you know, help with things. And here is my direct email address for those of you who don't know. That gets direct to me. And then if you have any suggestions on lettering, things that you're running into consistently, that helps me kind of better plan the lessons as well. So, you know, just give me an email, give me some suggestions, and I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. And give me a day or two to